Hello. Yesterday, we started speaking about the various different trends in the Orthodox Jewish world on the eve of World War One, and we spoke yesterday about what was going on in Germany and a little bit about what was going on in Lithuania, Poland, and Northern Eastern Europe. I'd like to continue with that today and talk about one of the important movements which existed before World War One in Northern Eastern Europe, and specifically mostly in Lithuania and Poland, and then we'll continue on from there. The first of this movement is called the Mussar movement. Now, we all know the word Mussar. Please write down the term Mussar movement. We all know that Mussar normally is taken to understand when I tell you something, you're doing something wrong, and you need to fix what you're doing. I'm giving you Mussar. I'm telling you that this is something which you have to change. Well, that's not actually what the word Mussar means in a literal sense. Mussar means yes to rebuke in the actually, let me take that back. In a literal sense, that is what Mussar means, because Mussar comes to the word liyaser, which means to torment. And when I give you Mussar, I may be tormenting you. But what Mussar means in the broader sense is that one has to work on one's character and personality independent of any other study or any other pursuit which one has. And that notion was somewhat of a new idea when Rabbi Yisrael Salanter, the founder of the Mussar movement, came on the scene in the mid-1800s and said, you know what, we have to work on our character and personality, not just on our intellectual and other pursuits, but rather also independently on our character and personality, becoming good, better people. And there's a story which I heard from one of my Rebbeim, which I'd like you to please remember, and perhaps not just write it down, but trying to show that you understand it in some way, shape, or form if you can. I'm not going to require that, but it's an interesting story. And it's perhaps never happened, but it's a story which captures the idea of the Mussar movement, which is that Rabbi Yisrael, who was a brilliant Talmid Chacham, was once standing in shul on Yom Kippur in Vilna, next to a Rosh Shiva who remains nameless for reasons which will become apparent momentarily. And this Rosh Shiva wasn't davening, obviously, out of a machzor. Rabbi Yisrael ran a test. Rabbi Yisrael was so brilliant that I'm sure he did not need a machzor. But he went and stood next to the Rosh Shiva there, and he went like this. Can I look inside with you because I have no machzor? And the Rosh Shiva went like this. And he elbowed him aside. And he goes, how dare you impinge on my kavanah by your trying to share my sinner? So therefore, Rabbi Yisrael said, had the Rosh Hashiva thought for 1 minute what HaKadosh Baruch Hu would find more appropriate and what the right thing to do is, he would have realized that the right thing to do is if somebody else needs a machzor, to share the machzor, even if it diminishes your kavanah by some minute amount. But this Rosh Hashiva did not have this perspective. His perspective was, my davening should be impinged, should be less just because of you. Makes no sense. I don't have to. My davening comes first. So this short idea gives this short story, very short story, gives this idea of what the Mussar movement was all about. And the Mussar movement was something which had a tremendous battle to be accepted in the yeshivas specifically, because the yeshivas until then had not had this notion of any other pursuit other than actually learning Torah, whatever form of Torah, but learning. And Mussar required what's called, and please write this down, one of the primary tools of Mussar is cheshbon hanefesh, making a reckoning and determination whether I am doing the right thing or not doing the right thing. How should I proceed? What is best for Hashem's will to be accomplished in this world, and what's best for me to become a better person, and what's best for me to be able to interact with other people in the best possible way. Rabbi Salanter's Talmidim fought to introduce Mussar into yeshivas. It was a famous story, which I'm not going to make you write down, which is that when Rabbi Salanter's Talmud, Reb Itzla Peterburger. It's a Peterburger because he was a Rav for a while in St. Petersburg. His name was Rabbi Yitzchak Blazer. He came to the yeshiva in Volozhin, which was the primary yeshiva in Eastern Europe in the 1800s. And he came to try to introduce Mussar to the yeshiva. And he was met by the Rosh Yeshiva. His name was Reb Chaim Soloveitchik, who later became more famous as Reb Chaim Brisker, because he was the Rav later in the town of Brisk, which actually does not exist. It's a town called Brest-Litovsk, but the Jews call it Brisk. We contract the name. So Rabbi Solanta was told at the door, so to speak, by Reb Chaim Brisker, he said, Mussar's like castor oil. Castor oil is a very foul-tasting medicine of the 1800s. He said, if a sick person takes castor oil, he can get better. But if a healthy person takes castor oil, he will get sick. So therefore, and here in Volozhin, we're all very healthy, so therefore we don't need castor oil. Obviously, Rabbi Solanta felt that was not the case. His Talmidim felt that was not the case. And everybody could use a healthy dose of introspection, thinking about themselves, deep inside themselves, understanding of their purpose in life, which is something which we discussed when we discussed Viktor Frankl, and a consideration of how to go forward with that. And Rabbi Solanta introduced not just Svarim to learn, but also techniques to use in order to work on oneself. A couple of them I'd like you to write down. One of them is Mussar Bispa'alus. Now, Hispa'alus is usually mispronounced Hispa'alus, because it's more, it slides off the tongue easier. But Hispa'alus was spelled Hey, Suf, Pei, Ayin, Lamed, Vav, Suf. Hispa'alus. Hispa'alus means, a poel means to act. Poel is a person who works. Hispa'alus means to activate oneself. And Rabbi Solanta used to say that the way in which to cause Mussar to penetrate oneself is to say a phrase, a statement, one which is meaningful to you, one which addresses what you need to work on. Bikol otsev usfasayim dokos. Kol otsev means means sad, but more of a yearning voice and burning lips. And he said you should repeat the phrase over and over and over again with a unique nigun, which is going to make the phrase penetrate you, because human beings are much more impacted upon by emotion than by intellect. It's not supposed to be that way. Really, we're supposed to have our intellect impact upon us more than our emotion, but our emotion impacts upon us more than our intellect does. And therefore, to fight emotion, negative emotions or negative traits, one has to have an emotional weapon. And if a person, say, would take a midah out of Pirkei Avos, heavy. Let's take the beginning of, let's say, heavy as kinomer lasos ritzon abicha shabashamayim. So right, let's be like strong like a tiger to do the will of your Father in heaven. And that's the person's supposed to use that to try and get up in the morning and go up and serve Hashem as appropriate. So if a person made a nigun for that, which was a nigun, a melody which penetrated one's soul and made oneself more aware of emotionally of the idea of being as strong and bold like a leopard or a tiger, that would have a powerful impact on a person. So that's the first tool Rabbi Solanta suggested, Mussar Bispa'alus. Okay. The second tool is, please write this down, is a Beis HaMussar, a Mussar house. In other words, they're supposed to be not just in the yeshivas. He imagines us drop-in centers throughout a city. People would be able to drop into a place and sit there and not learn, not study, but work on their own character traits, either by Mussar Bispa'alus within that room, or by having what's called and this is the third thing which I'd like to write down. So we had Mussar Bispa'alus, Beis HaMussar, and a Vad. A Vad is a small group of people who get together, literally means a committee, who get together to work on themselves. Vad is Vav Ayin Daled, or VAAD. And that they work on themselves and try and figure out together how they can support and sustain and encourage each other to become better people. You're not allowed to learn something else in the Beis HaMussar. We're allowed to open up another sefer which wasn't about Mussar. You had to learn, experience, do Mussar in the Beis HaMussar, nothing else. One of the great Balei Mussar of the 20th century, Avraham Melech Kaplan, says that he thinks that if that was introduced on a mass scale, which it never was, introduced on a mass scale, would change the face of society. Certainly Jewish society, and the truth is that even non-Jewish society would be able to benefit from the idea of having Batei Mussar, where people would go in from time to time and try and work on themselves and develop themselves and their character. So now, both the Lithuanian schools of thought, and in other words, the Northern Eastern Europe schools of thought of the yeshivas, which focused on mostly intellectual activity, except when they did adopt Mussar into the curriculum, and the Mussar school of thought focused on the accomplished shleimus of a person, trying to perfect the person, whether it's intellectually, and that was mostly for the intellectual elite who were in the yeshivas, or in terms of character and personality, which Rabbi Solomon intended to be available to any man, woman, and child who was able to actually understand the notion, understand the concept, and deal with it. But way back in the 1700s, they developed in southern Eastern Europe. Now, by southern Eastern Europe, I mean what's called today in the Ukraine and southern Poland, but beyond that, south of that, were the Balkan states, where World War I erupted. Specifically, however, not quite when you get down to the Balkans, but between, and you should look at a map, perhaps we'll look at a map one of these days. So this in Romania, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, places where many of your ancestors came from. There took stronghold the idea of Chassidus. Chassidus was originated by the Baal Shem Tov, and he lived in the mid-1700s. Please write down. Actually, you should write down today. Rabbi Solanter, founder of the Mussar movement. The Baal Shem Tov, founder of Chassidus. And the Baal Shem Tov was about 150 years earlier than Rabbi Solanter, more or less, was founded the movement of Chassidus, which then spread like wildfire throughout southern Eastern Europe. And I want to tell you something interesting, which is Rav Dessler, points out, which is that Lithuania and the northern Eastern European countries had a very cold and bleak climate and landscape. So people who came from there were kind of cold and bleak. And they were not. That was not so. Chassidus does not take hold of cold and bleak people. Bleak is spelled B-L-E-A-K. In southern Eastern Europe, the climate was warmer and the terrain was less bleak and more picturesque. And therefore, in that place, Chassidus, which is a warm and kind of picturesque in terms of the way they dress and so on and so on and so forth, the approach towards Avodas Hashem developed. And Chassidus came in response to a problem which now everybody had to address at this point, but was already being addressed in Eastern Europe 150 years earlier, which was that the common person who was not a big Talmid Chacham did not have the sense that their Avodas Hashem was meaningful. Because before Chassidus came along, all of Eastern Europe was focused on the growth in Torah as being the almost exclusive way in which one became a better and greater person and one achieved fulfillment in life. So without that sense of fulfillment and that capacity to accomplish, many people felt that they had nothing in their lives to make themselves feel significant in terms of their capacity to connect to Hashem and to be obedient to Hashem. So along came the Baal Shem Tov, and said, you don't have to be a big Talmid Chacham to become close to Hashem. If you're able to say Tehillim with Kavanah, if you're able to daven with Kavanah, if you're able to sing with Kavanah, if you're able even to eat with Kavanah, all these things can bring you closer to Hashem. And the Baal Shem Tov stressed to a way which did not really exist in Am Yisrael previously, the idea of experiences. Experiences make you closer to Hashem. So Chassidus said, happy and joyous experiences for the most part, sometimes other kinds of experiences, but mostly happy and joyous experiences bring you closer to a sense of connection to Kodesh Baruch Hu. No matter who you are, no matter how intellectual you are, no matter how smart you are, it doesn't matter. If you can become emotionally close to Hashem, that will make you feel a sense of mission, purpose, and accomplishment. Now, see an interesting thing here, which is Chassidus and Mussar both speak to emotion. Mussar uses emotion to come closer to character perfection, and that I call shleimus, because that's a perfection is in Hebrew shleimus. The Chassidus is meant to use his emotion to accomplish what we call dveikus. Dveikus, literally, devek means glue. Dveikus means to glue two things together. In this case, it means to connect us with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So please write this down in your notes. Mussar focused on shleimus. The yeshivas which did not accept Mussar, which were completely intellectual, certainly focused on shleimus of a different kind, intellectual, not in terms of character or personality. Chassidus was focused on dveikus and use the emotion in order to make people feel close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The more emotionally connected you are to Hashem, the more fulfilling your life is. The more emotionally connected to Hashem you are, the happier you're going to be as well. So therefore, Chassidus focused, and it works the other way around. The happier you are, the more connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu you are. So therefore, Chassidus focused on dveikus, and this became very, very popular because, to be frank and honest, it's much easier to get to Hashem, but in the way of Chassidus and is in the way of Mussar or is pure intellectual Torah study. And this there spread like wildfire throughout Eastern Europe, and there was a lot of resistance to it. That's why the people, please write this down, there are Chassidim, and then there are Misnagdim. Misnagdim, neged means opponents, to oppose. The Chassidim were the Chassidim. Misnagdim actually predated Chassidim because once upon a time they were Chassidim. But after they became Chassidim, they had the group which pre-existed had to self-identify, and they identified as Misnagdim, as opponents. So I'm not sure, actually the same identified them as Misnagdim, and they took the name on. Why is a chassid called a chassid? Because chesed is an emotion. It's an emotion which is separate than chachma. In fact, in Kabbalah, the first of the emotions, there's 7 emotions. The first is really 6 and 1, which brings them all together, but that's not important for us right now. Chesed is the first of the emotions, and therefore a chassid is somebody who focuses on their emotional closeness to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So this, again, we've been going around. We started with Germany. We moved to northeast to upper northern Eastern Europe, including the upper parts of Poland and Lithuania. And now we've gone down to southern Eastern Europe, which includes the Ukraine, southern Poland, and many of the little states of what was then the Austro-Hungarian Empire prior to World War I. Okay, let's go now to the Western Europe, which by that I mean not Germany, but which we already dealt with, but to France and England, and next time we'll go on to America as well. In France and England, the Jewry was very, very weak, Orthodox Jewry. It was very much, did not have that, to the extent that Trim Der Cheretz did penetrate France and England. There was some orthodoxy which was successful, but it was very small and very weak and inconsequential for the large part. We don't really find any strong intellectual or other types of Orthodox Jewish trends in Western Europe. We find a lot of assimilation. And one of those people who was greatly assimilated was Theodor Herzl, who founded Zionism. Now, he didn't actually found it, it was existed before him, and it was quite possible it was founded by Frum Jews in Eastern Europe, but Theodor Herzl was the one who put it on the world stage. And since he put it on the world stage, he is always the one who's associated with it as if the father of Zionism. And Zionism was the main trend in the secular Jewish world, not non-Orthodox, even to a certain extent Orthodox world as well. And we will have to tackle Zionism separately, perhaps before we deal with America tomorrow. So remember, please write these down again if you haven't read them yet. Today we dealt with Northern Eastern Europe, Mussar versus the yeshivas. Again, shleimus, whether in character traits or just in intellectual pursuits. And then we dealt with Southern Eastern Europe, which has to do with the Chassidus, which focuses on Dveikus, on connecting to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There's one other thing I want to mention before I finish today. I'm going to make it a bit shorter today to see if that actually works out better for you. You can let me know. There was a movement in Southern Eastern Europe, specifically in Hungary and Romania and places like this, called the Neolog movement. Neolog is spelled Neolog, and that is more or less similar to what later became conservative Judaism. And there was tremendous battles between the Orthodox Jews and the Neologin. And this is something which is ignored to a large part when we talk about Jewish history, because there are no more real Neologin today. They've kind of gone extinct. But a tremendous battle against Neologin was the basis for a certain political trend, which we'll get to perhaps tomorrow, in terms of the attitude towards the Zionist movement. Okay, so Zionism tomorrow, America tomorrow. Make sure to write down the notes I asked to write down and submit them to me, and enjoy the rest of your day.